Welcome to another episode of Live from the Blue Seats. I'm your host, Rob, joined this week by producer JL, John-Luc Shapiro. Dave is off. I might be feeling a little bit under the weather, so get well soon, Dave. I do not have an off-color joke or witty remark to follow it up, but JL, do you?
Get well soon, Dave. You'll be back. I'll be nice to you. For some reason, he thinks I'm always mean to him, but that's okay.
That's okay. So on this week's show, we are going to talk about the suddenly, well, surging might be a strong word, but the suddenly quite improved New York Rangers. We're 2 weeks into the calendar year 2025, and this looks like an almost completely different hockey team, which is a welcome sight given the mud that they kind of slogged and dragged and crawled through for the better part of the previous 2 months. And I think, because it's been such a tough year and so sort of doom and gloom, I kind of want to have this be a good vibes episode where, maybe we talk about some of the players who deserve recognition for helping to engineer this turnaround. Obviously a lot of attention has gone to the guys like Mika Zibanejad, who is definitely playing a lot better. Certainly Will Cooley's been a bright spot all year. Adam Fox has been, in some ways, not quite his dominant self, but still very, very good. But there's some other players that I think, jump off the page, even though they are somewhat, unheralded. So, but before we get into all that, JL, how are you? How are you doing this on this fine and cold Wednesday evening as we record live from the Blue Seats?
I'm good. The Rangers are certainly helping. It's just nice to wake up and not have to worry about the Rangers absolutely dropping a dud every night. It's kind of weighing down, but I'm good. I'm good. Life's good, man. Can't complain. I could, but I won't.
So yeah, I wanted to let's just look at the top line sort of performance before we kind of jump into the specifics. So the Rangers are, I'll call it a modest but much improved 4-1-2 since the calendar flipped to 2025. Their most recent result as we record this was a really difficult but really well played, hard fought overtime loss to the Colorado Avalanche. They led the game 2-1 for most of it after taking the lead in the second period on an Adam Edstrom goal, which was I was going to say unexpected, but Edstrom's put a couple of pucks in the net. Sam Carrick's been putting the puck in the net. So all of a sudden the Rangers have a very productive bottom six, not just off the score sheet, but on the score sheet. So they're leading 2-1, but they do give up a goal with 1 minute and 13 seconds left to tie it. Arturi Lehkonen bangs home a rebound on a puck that, I think maybe half the fan base thinks Igor Shesterkin should have had and should have stopped and not allowed a rebound. The other half of the fan base maybe feels the other way. I know Steve Valiquette on MSG postgame thought it was a puck that Shesterkin could have and should have caught cleanly. Then they get a boatload of chances in overtime to win the game, including a power play, including a Mika Zibanejad breakaway. Don't put it away. And then, as is usually the case, especially in 3-on-3, Colorado sustains a little bit of pressure in the final minute of overtime and scores the game winner Devon Taves on a one-timer that, again, and now I think maybe Steve was being a little harsh on Shesterkin, but Steve Valiquette, again, on MSG postgame, thought that was a puck that maybe Shesterkin could have or should have had. So a tough loss, but also the Rangers have point in 6 out of their last 7 games. And now they've played the first 2 games of a very difficult, sort of Western road trip, even though they didn't go all the way to the Pacific time zone. at Vegas, at Colorado, and got 3 points out of 4, and looking to make it 5 out of 6 when they face off against the Utah Hockey Club on Thursday night. So, JL, just initial thoughts on that Colorado game and what your takeaways were from it.
I like the effort, especially against a hot team like Colorado. They didn't give them much room to really navigate. Colorado is just scorching hot, just really good just in general. So it's really hard to keep a team down like that. Stuff will happen. I thought the effort was good. I thought they were engaged. I really liked what I saw from Sam Carrick, of all people, finding a way to create separation from Cale Makar, of all people.
That was unreal.
It was, it was nice to see him, play well. And obviously, like you said, the bottom six is playing well. Mika Zibanejad, very happy with the way he played too. I've been very critical of him, obviously not just me, but also, plenty of us out here. But it's nice to see him kind of still find his way around the ice, kind of get better shots on net. Looks a lot better without Chris Kreider on his line. Overall, I mean, they played very well, and it's a tough loss. Yeah. And obviously it's getting late early. So you want to accumulate as much as you can, but you get I don't want to call it a loser point, but you get a point against a good team like that, even though the game didn't go your way. It's going to happen a few more times this year. So I liked what I saw. It was nice to see Hedel back. That was nice to see. He looked good. That line, Hedel, Kreider, Kaliev, they'll find some way at some point. No, but I liked what I saw, and I'm really happy with the way that they're playing, and hopefully we get by the time this releases, it'll be before, the Utah Hockey Club game. So hopefully we'll get a better result than we did on opening night.
Yeah, I think, let's start with Sam Carrick. And I mentioned that there were some guys that I wanted to just single out for some praise and maybe a little bit of a deeper analysis. And the first one is Sam Carrick, right? So, and maybe let's start here where at the beginning of the season or in the offseason, when Sam Carrick was brought in almost as a 1-for-1 swap for Barclay Goodrow, right? So obviously Chris Drury does the difficult thing, letting a very well-respected player go in somewhat controversial fashion. We know that Goodrow himself was not happy. We know that the current Ranger team, many of whom became close with Goodrow over the years, they were not happy with the way the situation was handled. But it really can't be argued that what he has brought to the ice, especially when compared to the player that he is replacing, Barclay Goodrow, it's nothing short of a hugely significant upgrade here. And so, first of all, kudos to Chris Drury for making the right move, not only, getting rid of Barclay Goodrow. I don't mean that to sound more harsh than it is, but subtracting the net negative, and not just replacing it with, someone who's, let's say, less bad, but someone who's actually a net positive on the ice. And Sam Carrick has now become one of those players that, in another season, fans might sort of get a little upset at the coaching staff, a little perturbed, if you will, when a player like Carrick would get an uptick in ice time, right? And look, he was on the ice in overtime when the Rangers beat the Devils. He scored the game-winning goal. He's playing 13 to 15 minutes a night now, right? So he's being deployed more like a third line center, even though he is on what is essentially the fourth line. He gets a lot of extra shifts in the defensive zone in place of guys like Kaliev, in place of guys like Will Cooley. He'll go out there as a second option on a draw with Trocheck, right, late in the game, protecting a lead. And again, this is the sort of thing that might normally upset a fan base because he's taking ice time from a younger player, or it's a conservative approach. But I don't think there's any Ranger fan who, at this point, doesn't like seeing Sam Carrick on the ice. Now, I might be painting with too broad a brush there, but he's been really, really good. And he's making, I do not even have it in front of me, but I know it's significantly less than Barclay Goodrow's $3.6 million cap hit. And he's bringing not just production now with some, a few goals and assists here in the last, couple of weeks, but absolutely an edge and something that I think, an attitude that the team needs, and I think has finally started to follow. So I'll be honest, I really love Sam Carrick, and this is not sort of the not in the same way that I love, say, Ryan Reeves with the 1 year fling that the Rangers had with him, coming out of the tough sort of Tom Wilson thing. And then everybody really gravitated towards Reeves because he brought such a swagger and an attitude, even though he was, pretty much not contributing all that much on the ice.
Mm-hmm.
This is a wholly different story because Carrick really is a good hockey player who can do a lot of things on a winning team. And I think he's shown that for the Rangers, especially over the last 3 weeks or so.
Oh yeah. Sam Carrick is making $1 million AAV. So he's making, well, Barclay Goodrow was what, 3.5, 3.8, just about?
Yeah, 3.6, I think. Yeah.
3.6. So you knew that was the move going forward once they let Goodrow go. You knew exactly what they were getting for that. And a lot of people were confused. Now, it's funny you mentioned that. So the overtime winner against the Devils. So I was at the game and I was actually the guys in front of me in my section, they heard me say, because I said this out loud, I saw Riley Smith and Sam Carrick out on overtime, and not even 5 minutes later, they're going on a 2-on-1, and Carrick banks it home for an empty netter. So, but no, you're absolutely right. You nailed it on the head right there. He's been nothing but productive. He's been somewhat decent on draws. He, like you said, he's been utilized. I noticed that he's been primarily utilized as sort of like a late game Rempe replacement.
That's yeah.
For certain parts of the line. So like, if they'll throw, well, I don't want to say a replacement per se, but they'll use him a little more in certain situations, and then they'll have him out with someone else. So they'll double his ice time with the 2/3 of the fourth line. They'll use him more, so to speak, is what I should say. So he's been very reliable. And as of late, it seems like he's gotten a little more comfortable, and there's a little bit of an offensive upswing coming out from him. He's making a lot of good plays, a lot of smart passes, a lot of good offensive pressure, because you could even factor in Matt Rempe into this, along with, Jimmy Vesey. They do a somewhat decent job holding on to the puck in their own zone, especially Edstrom. Edstrom has been a very nice surprise, but Carrick definitely supplements a lot of those two very well. And, we saw it last season when Carrick was in between, not Carrick, Goodrow was in between Edstrom and Rempe. And you could tell there was something missing because Edstrom and Rempe are, way better skaters than Goodrow, and Goodrow was kind of lagging behind. Sam Carrick can keep up. As crazy as that is to say about a guy like Matt Rempe, but he's not a terrible skater. He's not Ryan Reeves out there. He can.
move.
So the thing I like about Carrick is, and I think someone in our chat posted this, that Sam Carrick might be the heart of the team right now, because he is giving you that strong two-way bottom six, sort of similar to what Goodrow brought, and he's making less, and he's got a little bit more of an offensive flair to him. So if the Rangers do make the playoffs, I wouldn't doubt we'll have a similar sort of progression like we had with Barclay Goodrow. And look, I'll say this again. God bless Barclay Goodrow. He was phenomenal towards the end of this last season and was absolutely killer during the playoffs. He served his purpose, justified the contract, but they couldn't justify to keep him. And hopefully Sam Carrick can repeat that. And, he's here for another 2 seasons. So you can really get a lot of mileage out of him while you potentially find someone else down the line to take that spot. But he's played so well. It's very nice. It's always nice to see when he's out there, because, he's definitely doing his part.
The fourth line has been a bright spot all year, but I do think that, now that the wins are coming and sort of the rest of the team is following in a lot of ways the example that the fourth line is setting. I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. There are multiple shifts per game where, they get the puck into the offensive zone and they keep it there. They're hard on the forecheck. I think the length of Edstrom and Rempe bother defensemen. I think that, and I know that Rempe's become a punchline, and a lot of that's his own fault because of the, ill-timed hits that he's thrown and sort of the lack of control of his own game that he has shown in his early NHL career. But look, since he's come back, he stuck to his word. He was interviewed and he said, "I'm a marked man. I know it. I've got to play the game way more under control, or else I'm gonna get suspended, and the next one's gonna be 20 games or more, and it might be his last chance to make a career out of this, right?" So, kudos to him for keeping the energy up, dialing the unnecessary physicality back. But look, he still gets into the corner, and you see how defensemen react. They throw pucks away. They try to just chip it past him, and he's too goddamn big, and it just hits him in the leg, and he's able to keep them pinned in their own end. So you've got that element already. What I think is really a pleasant surprise, and you alluded to this, JL, is, Carrick has really underrated offensive instincts. Obviously the goal he scores against Colorado is just a beautiful sort of double, deep backhand, forehand, or forehand, backhand, back to the forehand to finish. High skill play. But even the pass to Edstrom to set up the breakaway for the second goal, I think if you watch that live, and I was texting with my brother who, kind of had this observation, so I'll give him the credit. You're watching it, you're like, he should have passed it earlier, right? The puck gets chipped past the defenseman. They're breaking out of the defensive zone. You see Edstrom way ahead of him, and you're like, all right, he should just throw a breakaway pass to him immediately. But I think he read the play well enough to sort of draw the one defenseman that was back, draw that defenseman to him, and then just slip it around him. And then Edstrom gets a shorter breakaway, but it's a much more clean breakaway, as opposed to what might have been a 2-on-1 or a partial 2-on-1, or it would have been a bad pass, and it would have forced Edstrom to come in on an angle. Carrick timed it so perfectly that puck landed on Edstrom's stick. He's speeding down the middle of the ice with no one in front of him, and snaps one past Mackenzie Blackwood. Beautiful goal. Ultimately, is the reason the Rangers end up getting a point out of Colorado. So, and Colorado's been great. Look, I know they're banged up, but they are one of the better teams in the NHL, not just record wise, but in terms of their 5-on-5 play, their underlying, numbers are very strong. Mackenzie Blackwood's been lights out since they got him in goal. So, that is not a slouch team they beat. Vegas, not a slouch team that they beat. Nope. To start off this trip. So, and I honestly thought they really outplayed Vegas. The Colorado game was pretty tight. It was pretty, tightly contested, pretty even across the board in terms of, scoring chances. I know the Rangers did a lot of work defensively, last ditch blocks and stuff like that. I thought they owned the game against Vegas, other than the first 7 or 8 minutes. I thought they were far and away the better team. And that was really impressive because, Vegas is considered a powerhouse. They're right up there with, Edmonton, Carolina. I guess you could say the Caps. I don't know if I fully buy the Caps yet. They feel like they're like a year early this year and they're having a great year, but I don't know that they're actually a Stanley Cup contender. We'll see. But Florida, right? They're in that upper echelon of teams. And look, this is what's so frustrating about this Ranger season to me, right? Is that the Rangers are there too, or they should be, but they had such a bad slump that now that, this season still very much hangs in the balance. And as good as they have been since the calendar flipped to 2025, one more even below average streak really jeopardizes their playoff chances. So, JL, I did want to ask you, so we covered Carrick. Is there anybody else, any other player that's sort of, let's call him unheralded, not the headliner names? Again, we talked about Zibanejad's game has improved. Nice to get Kreider and Hedl back. Trocheck's always been, sort of an emotional leader, and his game is starting to turn around. But kind of, again, the second or third tier of players on this team, is there anyone else that stands out to you that you want to single out for praise here in the name of this Good Vibes episode?
Well, it's 2 guys really, but they fall in the same kind of category. Urho Vaakanainen and Will Borgen. Okay. Now, when he was traded to the Rangers, everybody was, they were a little upset, or
Borgen.
Borgen. Yeah. Understandably,
people were okay with Vaakanainen, I think, because he had first round pedigree and kind of had decent underlying numbers. If you're one of the if you see the charts online, like Vaakanainen's chart was not a nightmare. Borgen definitely one of the lower ranked defensemen in a lot of metrics. So I wanted to be clear there.
Right. So when they traded for Borgen, it was sort of like, oh boy, well, this is the guy we traded for Kakko. And look, it didn't matter what was going to happen. The Rangers were going to lose out on that trade. And with Vaakanainen, they didn't want to give them Cam Fowler, but I guess that was sort of a blessing in disguise because Vaakanainen and Borgen have probably been two of the better defensemen since they've been here. Borgen playing with Keandre Miller, that was a little bit of a learning curve, with Miller's somewhat deficiencies out there, but we're not going to get into that. We've pretty much covered that on last week's episode. But Borgen has seemingly kind of stepped it up a little bit. He's looked a lot better in his own zone. He's more comfortable with Miller on the ice. He seems to know where his positioning is and what he needs to do for that. But also, he's also stepping up. Like I probably mentioned this before, but he's active because he can skate. That was the thing. And this is what you said is, basically he's a better skating Jacob Trouba, and you're paying him way less to do something that you wanted Trouba to do. And so, now that he's a little more comfortable, he's looked a lot better. And, he's even got, a goal or two to his name. And, he had a couple of nice plays in that barn burner against Washington, but you can see he's a lot more comfortable. And the Rangers defensive core looks a lot better now. And then also with Vaakanainen too, once the Rangers traded for him, everyone had said this is a defense only guy. I think he only has about like 2 career goals, if I'm correct. Doesn't really have much in terms of offense. But honestly, I don't think that's what the Rangers need back there. You already have Adam Fox and Keandre Miller, and to an extent Braden Schneider. Not every defenseman has to be offensive. So, and then if you even want to go a little bit further, you have Zach Jones to kind of factor into there. That could potentially be an offensive D. So I think what's helped this team a lot in terms of their turnaround has been the steadiness of those two. And it's that's undeniably something that is been gosh, my brain is not working. That's undeniably something that's gone on, and you can see it because now they're playing more as a unit. When you saw them slumping with the piecemeal defense core that they had, it was always very broken. But now that they're beginning to get into the swing of things after the calendar changed, they're playing more as a unit. People are more comfortable making the right play. They're not doing anything too much. You leave all that to the upper echelon guys, so they make the simple play, they make the simple pass out, and they don't do anything else to keep it, difficult.
Yeah.
Vaakanainen and Borgen have been nothing but phenomenal in terms of just stabilizing something that was a tire fire for this team over the last couple of, at least month and a half, 2 months. And you can see it, and it trickles up to the forwards, and then it trickles down to the goalie, if that makes any sense. Because
100%.
now when they're breaking out, or when the team is moving in transition, it's a lot smoother. And that was the big gripe that we've had with Trouba, and it's still somewhat the gripe that we had with Lindgren, but with Adam Fox helps with that a little bit. And and look, I'll even say this too. Over the last couple of games, outside of the one hiccup that he had against Dallas, Keandre Miller's been decent.
Yeah.
He's been very good. And we mentioned this last week, but I'll just say it again, just to kind of add to the good vibes. Him and Borgen have been playing pretty well. So I like what's going on with this team so far in terms of picking each other up, and they're doing a really good job at it. And it seems, and also just by looking at them on the ice, I'll just add this one last thing. You see them now, whether you look at them on the bench or you look at them on the ice, like, even from where I was sitting at when I went to the Devil Ranger game at Madison Square Garden, there's a different sort of feeling when they're out there. They're a little bit more engaged. They're more than willing to go after somebody for their teammate. Guys like, obviously Rempe, but, Trocheck, Carrick, Edstrom has gotten really chippy since he's come to the NHL. Look, I'll say this. Hope, who, is with the blog, she said that he was never this type of guy in Hartford. And all of a sudden he comes to the NHL, and he got into his first NHL fight, I think like in his first or second game of the season here. So all in all, Borgen and Vaakanainen have been two of the unsung heroes because they've stabilized something that the Rangers kind of needed to have fixed. And it's been, it's been a somewhat decent retool, and hopefully that this can continue, because I just really think Drury did a good job in getting those two, and they've done a really good job.
Yeah, I think what you've seen is just overall stability and consistency that just has not been there all season. Um, and to your point about how it kind of has a knock-on effect on the rest of the team, you've seen the goaltending rebound now, right? And that was one of the other things that, and I think I posted this on Blue Sky, and I don't have it in front of me, and I pulled up some stats here that I'm gonna I'll reference in a second, and I don't want to click away from this and do another round of searching, but I know that their goaltending was, I believe it was, I want to say 26th in the league, 27th out of 32 teams in terms of save percentage during that streak, during that 4-15 streak. And that's not to say that the goalies were to blame at all, because the team was just a mess around, or around them and in front of them. But you've seen the goaltending rebound because the structure is that much better, right? Because of the stability that they have on the back end now. Look, here's what I'll say about Keandre Miller, and then I'll sort of continue to heap praise on Borgen, and to a lesser extent Vaakanainen. And I do agree he's been fine, although I think there's an argument to be made for Zach Jones in that spot. But Keandre Miller makes very loud mistakes, and that's why his mistakes are most noticed. He probably commits the same amount of turnovers as Adam Fox. And the reason is because he's the primary get the puck out guy, either by skating or making the first pass. He's obviously a very gifted, athlete and player. And I think the coaches probably want him to, initiate the breakout, use those tools to create, speed and momentum up the ice for himself and his team. But his mistakes are always very noticeable, and they always seem to happen at the worst possible time. He overskated a puck 4 seconds into the game against Colorado on Tuesday night, led to a grade A scoring chance right off the bat. And it was like everybody, I'm sure, was like covering their eyes and shaking their head. And it's like, that kind of thing happens all the time. He was retrieving a puck in the corner. It took a weird bounce on the boards. It hopped over his stick and it turned into a scoring chance in front. So, and I think he gets a lot of criticism, and those mistakes seem to be following him around more so this year than in previous years. That said, his game has been better lately. And I think he probably gets a little bit of undue criticism for making the same amount of mistakes that everybody else around him makes. But Will Borgen's been nothing short of a very, very pleasant surprise. And I do want to do just a little bit of like self-congratulatory, not quite I told you so here, but look, I said this on this podcast. I sent it out.
Yes,
I put
you
it out on
did.
Blue Sky a couple days ago. Let's give him 10 games. Let's just, because everybody just, and look, this is the world we live in. I get it. You look at the stats, you look at the chart, you read like one Seattle blog maybe about the player, and you pass judgment. And I said, you know what? Maybe let's just see him play 10 games as a Ranger before we pass judgment. And the first 3 or 4 games were horrible, by the way. They really weren't good. Yeah. And they sort of confirmed everybody's worst fears. But now the last 5 or 6, getting comfortable as a Ranger, obviously coming to a new team is always a huge adjustment. He has said in the media that it's a different system, what Laviolette's asked the team to do, and they have gone back to the 1-3-1. I don't want to get too technical, but there's a lot more 1-3-1, which I think is helping their overall defense and keeping opposing scoring chances down. They're giving up way less off the rush. But this is a different system than he played in Seattle. He went through 2 or 3 coaches in Seattle as well. So everybody just needed to take a deep breath, let Will Borgen adjust to his surroundings, let him adjust to a new teammate and partner. And so far, him and Keandre Miller have been, very good. Frankly, like if you look at the numbers and if you want to be objective about it, over the last 6 or 7 games, they've been the Rangers' most consistent pair. Obviously Adam Fox does wonders. And I think Ryan Lindgren's game has stabilized. I still think that he's, less than adequate for a top pair defenseman, if, just to say it bluntly, especially on a contending team. But that pair has stabilized, and, Fox is Fox. But Borgen Miller has been really good, and that has been the shutdown pair. Like Peter Laviolette has them out there all the time against the other team's top players. Really quickly on Vaakanainen, I totally agree. I think he's been really solid. I think he's exactly what the Rangers thought they were getting when they traded for him. I still think Zach Jones should get some more opportunity with Braden Schneider. As much as The team is playing well, and defense, needs to be the focal point. And it's been much better. Again, I pulled up just on Natural Stat Trick their per 60 stats over the last 7 games for the Rangers. So again, small sample size, but high danger chances, right? This is what I'm looking at. Per 60, the Rangers are allowing 9.62. That is not a great number. The best team in the league in terms of high danger chances against per 60 over that span is Winnipeg. They allow less than 7 per 60. The Rangers are middle of the pack. They allow 9.5 or 9.62 or whatever it is per 60, but that's way better than what it was 3 weeks ago, right? So they're generating 10 to 11 high danger chances per game, right? Per 60 minutes at 5-on-5. So they are on the right side of the ledger there. They are generating more than they are giving up. That is the most important thing. And a lot of that is down to the stabilization of the defense. And I agree, Will Borgen's been a huge part of that. I will say also that now that the team appears to be collectively over what went on. Look, we talked at length, and we don't need to rehash the sort of off ice component of that slump and how the players probably could have and should have handled it much better from sort of a mental and emotional standpoint. But it does seem like they're over it now. It seems like it's fully in the past, and that whatever happens on the ice is the result of that night's effort, right? And that night's approach. There's no sort of black cloud hanging over the team anymore. There's no specter of, look, there may be more trades. And I think that's what makes the next 6 weeks really interesting here is how do you evaluate the Rangers? How far out of the playoffs are they? Are they in a playoff spot, right? They go into this podcast recording, I think 5 points out of a playoff spot, but with games in hand on almost everybody in front of them. Look, if they get into a playoff spot, I don't expect them to become aggressive buyers, but do they move a Zach Jones for a low round pick for somebody who can help them now? We can debate whether or not that's good asset management, but that might be a path that Chris Drury pursues. And the Rangers have a ton of cap space to go do something, this offseason, or excuse me, this winter, and at this deadline to help the team either improve its chances in the playoffs or, solidify a playoff spot. So, look, we are night and day from where this thing was 4 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago. It's a season now, and the Rangers have to keep up a really good pace. It's funny. I don't want this to sound like we are popping champagne because the Rangers are 4-1-2 in their last 7 games. I mean, in reality, that's 4 wins and 3 losses. They have to play, basically at a clip of getting 6 to 7 points out of every available 10 over the course of the next 6 weeks to really get into the playoffs. So that is a tall task, but it's not impossible. And I do think that, as I said, the black cloud has sort of dissipated now, and now it's just about playing hockey, which is, given all the drama and off ice stuff this year is a huge relief for me. So, I'm sure for you as well.
Yeah, the thing, and this is something that we reiterated a lot here on this podcast, and you can kind of sort of relate it to real life. It's more or less, it's kind of like, look, all right, you can be upset with, your boss, and you can be, upset that somebody is not there or they did something that kind of, I guess maybe mess things up a little bit. But at the end of the day, you have to go and do your job, because I think this is what kind of got through to them. This is purely conjecture. I'm not saying this is what it is. I'm just going off of what I think. After a while, you get tired of losing, I mean, even on the smallest of scales. Like, I'll use a quick real life example. So I'm not a big basketball player, but I play rec league basketball. It's to keep me active, right? And I play with a lot of guys who are good at basketball, but I also played other sports, and I'm a very competitive guy. And it sucks to lose. And it gets to the point where you lose so much, and we've had our fair share of losing, that you just kind of have to stop moping and just kind of do it. And something in the human mind just kind of switches, because you get tired of just, and then if there's nothing to come and like kind of be sort of like the savior to take you out, you just kind of have to do it. And you realize, hey, might as well just do this and maybe it'll change. Because the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting the same results.
Hmm.
If I'm saying that quote correctly, I'm probably not. But
I think you nailed it.
but well, thank you. But so I think what we see is, and also it helped that maybe there was like a bit of a break from well, I guess you had the Christmas break kind of helped, and then you kind of had the 2 games in Florida, and then like that sort of break in between until the game against Boston, which I think was on the second. So I
Hmm.
think that kind of helped them a little bit because they kind of fell flat in the Tampa game, but then when they went to go play Florida, which I was funny enough watching it up, I was watching it Duff's in Buffalo. They had it on the TV. They looked good. So whatever kind of rest that they had after the Christmas break, you can see that it's sort of like energized them a little bit. So I think, they just decided to say, you know what, let's just do this. I guess
Yep.
they're probably coming together as a group too, which is nice. You can just see it. There's a bit more camaraderie. And look, I'll say this too. As quote unquote ineffective as he may be, they do play a little bit better when Matt Rempe's around. Okay. And you mentioned it before about how he could affect them on the ice, but I legitimately think he has a similar effect to them like Ryan Reeves had when he was here. Not the greatest
Yeah.
player, but you can see that there's a little bit more of an edge, and they're a little bit more attentive in terms of how they play. So I'm not saying he's the sole reason, but he's definitely helping. And then maybe with the comfort level of, like you said, Borgen, and maybe also Sam Carrick too. You know, it takes a bit to kind of maybe adjust to a new team, and maybe Carrick is also another one that needed some time to adjust to. But all in all, it's nice to see them playing well, playing as a team, and when this team is fully healthy, I think they can sneak in and they say, all you need to do is just get in. Honestly, look,
Oh,
I knew,
yeah.
yeah, I knew for a fact that they weren't going to win the President's Trophy this year. You can just tell, not to say that
Yeah.
I didn't think that they
Almost no
could.
one repeats. That's
Right.
almost an impossible thing to do in hockey. It's just not that type of sport.
It's not,
There's way
yeah,
too much variance.
it's not feasible. So, but I thought that they'd be decent enough, and I feel like they're getting to that point again where they're just becoming decent enough to get to a playoff spot. I don't, the NHL, the way that they format the playoffs has essentially de-incentivized the sort of, winning the division and winning, being the best in the league sort of thing, because how many you can count on more fingers and toes than you have about how many lower seeds have come in and beaten top seeds. I mean, we saw it
Yeah.
ourselves with LA and San Jose and all those guys back in the day, you know. So if they can just continue to do this, and look, the East is, like you said, they had games in hand. The East is really weak this year,
It
which
is.
is
It's very
surprising to
weak.
me. It
I
is. It's
don't look
very
at
weak.
I don't look at any team ahead of them, especially now that they've beaten the Devils, which I think was a huge, especially in
Yeah.
the fashion that they did, outplaying them. I know the game went to overtime, but the Rangers outplayed them, especially in the third period.
Hmm.
Um, they outplayed them. Um, and they kind of got that monkey off their back, right? So,
Hmm.
um, but I don't look at any team ahead of them and think, wow, I'm scared of that team. I mean, even just
No.
looking immediately ahead of them, right, if in the wild card race. This is from the top wild card team, which is Boston. So it's Boston, Columbus, Ottawa, Montreal, Detroit, Philly, and Pittsburgh. Detroit,
Oh.
Philly, and Pittsburgh all have 44 points. The Rangers have 43. Again, this is at the time of recording
Hmm.
on Wednesday night, January 15th. I mean, there's a lot of straight up bad teams ahead of the Rangers, teams that the Rangers
Hmm.
are absolutely better than on paper. And I'll
Hmm.
say this as well. I don't think anybody wants to play the Rangers in a playoff series. None of these
No.
teams in the East, even the better ones, right? Even the Carolinas who can't beat the Rangers in the playoffs, uh, the Capitals, the Lightning. I mean, look, Florida would have no reason to be afraid of the Rangers, and I think the Rangers actually, it's the opposite there. I think the Rangers kind of fear the Panthers, but the the Rangers have experienced goaltending, high-end elite players that if they get hot, they can beat anybody in a 7-game series. So look, this is all a long way of saying, the team is putting itself back in the mix, and given how bad things got, that's all you could ask for. And I do think that there are reasons to be optimistic. And you mentioned those 2 games in Florida. Yeah, the Tampa Bay game got out of hand. They were pretty porous defensively in that game. But they also generated, I think they had 44 shots on goal. The offense had started to come alive. And I think pretty much from the moment they got their ass kicked by the Devils, which was that weird Monday afternoon game. It was December 23rd, right before the Christmas break.
I know all about that.
Looks like that was rock bottom. And to your point, JL, like psychologically, that was the Rangers saying like, all right, we've now had enough of this. We have too much pride as professional athletes who, for most of the last 3 years have been very good at this, right? One of the better teams in the league, won a lot of games, won a lot of playoff games, all that stuff. That's the last straw. We're just not going to allow that to happen again. And they've played much better since then. So now they just need to not only sustain the high quality play, they've got to get results. And what I found interesting in the aftermath of the Colorado game, and this will be our last point on all that. And then if there's a couple questions, we can get to those. I listened to a lot of the post-game reaction. Some of the players were, pretty, they were satisfied with the effort and somewhat upset about the result. But Adam Fox was really pissed off that they lost the game. Peter Laviolette was like seething in his post-game press conference, which is kind of unusual for him. He was really, really angry, really frustrated that they lost that game, because I think he looked at it and basically said like, or basically thought like, that's a game we have to win. Like, not only because we played well enough to win and we outplayed a very good team in their barn, but we need points. Like, we have got to get points. So look, I'm always one to look at, process as opposed to results over the course of a long regular season. But at a certain point, we're already in mid-January here. It's kind of got to start becoming results over process. They've got to stack wins. And even if they're not on their best game, they've got to find a way to grind out wins. They need to play at a 650, 700 points percentage to have a chance of a playoff spot here. So we'll see how it all shakes out. Want to start wrapping it up here, but before we do that, are there any questions? I think you said there might be a couple from our colleagues / fans.
Yes. So we have one on Twitter, and this is from our good friend Nick at Brooklyn Joker 90, and he does the traditional first time, long time here, and he writes, "Is it okay that I believe in our savior, Will Borgen? I'll hang up and listen. Thanks."
Well, we did already cover the Will Borgen experience, but I mean, listen, you would not be out of line if you were to say like, wow, I thought this guy stunk based on everything I heard on Twitter or on Blue Sky when they got him. And I'm pleasantly surprised. I mean, look, it speaks to, there's just a little bit more stability and calmness on the back end as a whole. And I think Borgen has helped the pieces fit together in a little bit more of a coherent way. He also does, this is something that I don't want to totally poach from somebody who knows way more about hockey than I do. But, one of the things Brian Boyle said on the New York Post podcast was he's really good at getting the puck through to the net, from the blue line, which is skill. It's kind of like this. I don't think people understand that shooting a puck through a maze of legs and ankles and sticks and bodies and getting it, to the goalie, or through the goalie or past the goalie is a really hard thing to do from 60 feet away. And, Borgen has good timing on his shots. He's willing to shoot the puck. He doesn't overthink it, but he also isn't just blindly firing it into shin pads and creating chances the other way. He's happy to make the next play, rim it around the boards, so he's got some decent decision-making ability in the offensive zone, even though he's certainly he's no dynamo. He's never going to score more than 20 points in a season.
Right.
But he does bring some positive stuff on that end of the ice as well.
Well, the thing too is you went when you made the Jacob Trouba comparison, I watch him and that's what I think of. And then obviously he has a lot better foot speed. So I think of like when he just throws it on net, you could tell it's with a purpose. When you looked at Trouba, you know, and what he was trying to do here and the role that he was not supposed to be in. You can tell he was just kind of not taking the shot at the right time. Like
Mhm.
he would just get it and immediately throw it on net, and it would either be blocked the other way or it would just be kind of a low, low danger chance.
Or he was
But
taking that slap shot and just literally trying to shoot it through everybody and often missing the
right.
net.
hmm So, with Borgen, it seems a little bit more intentional, but it's done in a good way. And, again, I just have to touch on the foot speed. That makes a real difference in terms of just how
Mhm.
the defense kind of gets back. Because, again, you want to reference back to what was the problem back in the Eastern Conference final was the Rangers' inability outside of like two defensemen to kind of get the puck out of the zone.
Yep.
And so in Will Borgen, he can do that and he can do it well, and he can also get back. Again, I really like to talk about the foot speed because I didn't expect him to be that good of a skater. I'm not
Yeah.
saying he's like a barn burner, but I mean for
He's very strong. For a guy his size, he's a very strong skater.
right, very strong skater, and I really think that the Rangers really did a good job in utilizing that sort of ability for what they have so far. So, to answer your question, Nick, is it okay that you believe in Will Borgen? Hey, listen, I'm right there with you, buddy.
Yeah. All right. Do we have any more or is that it?
We have one more, and this comes from, I think you might know who this is, Rob.
Okay.
This comes from on Blue Sky, and this is from Becky at BHABs at B Sky Social. I think you might know who that is.
I do know
And
her
she
somewhat well.
she asks, "Is it true that the Rangies are back?" Huh.
Great question.
Yes.
That might have to be the title of the episode. The Rangies are back. Or I don't I did you guys was that last week's episode title? It might have been.
No. Well, I can make it this week's episode
I
title.
think
So.
this is the Good Vibes episode. Either way, yes, Becky. As I record this, you may be able to hear me from the next room or downstairs or whatever. Uh, yes, they're back. The vibes are much better now. I don't want to say the vibes are all. I mean, look, we had some very, very high vibes over the last few years. And it's been a really fun sort of like era of the Rangers, and I try not to lose sight of that. Because this is supposed to be fun.
Mhm.
We're fortunate. I know you go to a lot of games, JL. I haven't gone to as many this year, but I've been fortunate to go to a lot of games over the last few years, playoff games, the Vinny Trocheck double overtime winner among them.
Oh. Oh.
Just
Oh
some
yeah.
really epic, awesome stuff. And
Mhm.
man, a lot of teams go 20 years, 30 years, 40 years without any moments like that. Look, I
Look at
know
Buffalo.
we all exactly. We all want the silver chalice. We all want the cup. But look, as we sit here on January, the Rangers have a pulse. They're right in it. This is a very mediocre Eastern Conference. Um, if they take care of business and get results there, we're going to have spring hockey, and that would be awesome. So yes, I'm going to declare the Rangies are back.
Yes, I am also in that boat. I definitely do think Le Rangies are back. It's just again, I'm probably repeating myself to a fault, but when like you said, and I mentioned this before too. It's like when you pay to go see a team play, whether it's the Mets or the Rangers or the Jets or whoever your favorite team is, you want obviously the best result to come in, and when they're not giving you that, it's very frustrating. And they're just the you want to know honestly the signal on how they're back. It's Mika Zibanejad, honestly. And I know we talked about him a bunch before, but when you see him going, I feel like everybody else builds off of that. Trocheck plays a
Yeah.
little bit better. Kreider plays a little bit better. The guys seem to feed off of him a little bit more. And that's what you look for in a guy like that. So are they back? 100%.
I love it. All right. Well, this was a lot of fun. Um, Good to be back. I know we missed Dave. Dave, hope you're feeling better. Maybe we can get back to our whole 3-man show, next week. But good to keep the content rolling.
Mhm.
JL, before we sign off, any quick final thoughts from you, or do you just want to leave it at Rangers back?
Um, just keep it going. That's it. This is a big game against Utah, and then even bigger game against the you have a game against the Blue Jackets on
Columbus,
Saturday.
yeah.
And then their next game, I think their next home game rather is on the 21st of next week, and that's against Ottawa. So you
Mhm.
have two teams who are ahead of you. Ottawa with 47 points, Columbus with 48. You come out of there and you get at least 3 out of 4 of those games. I mean, we're, plan the parade, as Tyler likes to say.
Um, it's a really good point. We're actually, we haven't been in this situation in a while. The Rangers have gotten so far ahead in the the past few years once they kind of came out of the rebuild period. They kind of jumped out ahead in early in seasons and kind of coasted to the playoffs. Um, from kind of 2021 on. This
Mhm.
is going to be a fight. And, it's not dissimilar to a lot of the Tortorella years, even AV's first year. The Rangers were kind of had a very similar record in mid January to the record they have right now, kind of hovering around 500. And it really made for, look, 3 months of basically having to play playoff hockey just to get into the playoffs. And, sometimes that can be an advantage to a team. Again,
Mhm.
like you said, JL, seeding does not matter in the Stanley Cup playoffs. And if you go in hot and kind of with that mentality of like, all right, every game is life or death, that can be an advantage to you. So
Mhm.
certainly Saturday night against Columbus, I think, that becomes truly the first big game of the year. Let's call it what it is. That is a big game for the Rangers. Sounds a little bit silly to say, there's, still almost half a season to go, but that's a big game. Columbus holds one of the wild card spots. They're a division rival. They've been a pleasant surprise this year. Certainly given the unspeakable thing that happened with them and Johnny Gaudreau in the offseason.
Mhm.
Um, so, kudos to Columbus for putting together a fantastic season. But the Rangers, that's a game they need to win. Saturday night at MSG. Looking forward to that one. So, thanks everyone for
Mhm.
listening. We'll be here to talk all about it. And hopefully the Rangers keep this thing going. We'll catch you next week.